man. Cardboard head guy already dropping the heat in the comments.
Ooh, wow. I mean, you and me are the perfect people to be answering Cardboard Head Guy's question, right? I mean,
maybe more so you than me, huh?
Come on now.
Yeah.
What do I think? I couldn't be any more goddamn excited. So I don't give a flying fart about the Grammys, nor do I. I've never watched the Grammys, but my wife was watching them. So she's sitting on the couch, and I'm sitting at the table at the other, because our main floor is kind of open concept. I'm sitting at the other end. I was editing a video, actually. I had headphones in and I couldn't hear. But I see Taylor win an award, so I take the headphones out. And I'm like, she's going to announce Reputation, Taylor's version.
The red herring, really Rob, the red herring.
Right? I don't really like that album, but of course I'm going to buy it. And then she drops this new one, and I'm like, frig.
And also, especially, Rob, now, this would be next level fandom. Do you have the actual Reputation vinyl or the picture disc?
The picture disc, because the vinyl one was only released for the FYE store in the States.
Yeah.
And there's only, what did I hear, 5,000 copies or less than 5,000 copies in the world.
Yeah, so that's, I didn't think so. It's weird that record never got a proper real release, right?
Right. I've seen one of the colored ones. The one store in Toronto had one, and they wanted like $3,000 for it.
You didn't want to drop it, or rather?
No.
Think about it. That's like half of your guitars. It's like
half of your guitars. Half of a couple of my guitars, maybe.
There it is. Yeah.
Half of that one.
Oh, see, there you go. You could have bought two.
That one is that blonde one that's behind me is 48 years old, so it's older than I am. So it's not 60s vintage, it's 70s, but they're getting up there price wise.
Yeah, I'd say.
We only got 6 people watching.
You over there?
What's that?
Yeah, your hoop tee over there, ready to go for the night?
I got my hoop tee, man, in a etched glass mug that my wife made. It has an etched picture of me and my son on the front.
The classiest water drinking apparatus I've ever seen.
Well, it has me and my son on, and then it says Super Dad on the back. So how could you not love that?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Sam's late, and we got 7 people watching. So, and Jason's working, and, Glenn retired. Hey, John, how's it going?
Well, kind of.
I had fun meeting Glenn yesterday.
Oh, I want to hear all about that, man.
That was great. So he lives like 2.5 hours from me. And while that's not a far drive, because I drive every day, it's just in that direction. I don't have a great need to go that way, because when you get the other side of Toronto, there's really nothing for like 5 hours. There's Kingston in the middle, but that's a few smaller towns. There's not a big reason for me to go there. But I do have one customer that's like 40 minutes from Glenn's house. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be in the east end of the city. Then it's only like another 30 minutes to this customer. Maybe Glenn could meet me because it's in the same town as Zap Records, which is Glenn's buddy. It's a great record store. So we met there and we had a blast. One of the best record stores I've ever been to. It's one of those old school record stores, right? Like not, it's, you know what I mean by that. And the guy was awesome. And he had some great stuff. And then we went out for lunch. Yeah. So Glenn traded in some stuff.
Yeah.
And with his trade in and some stuff that he found, he was spending a lot. And then he found there was this box set that he wanted. And he's like, oh, I got to phone Lynn, his wife, to get permission to buy this. So he calls Lynn on the phone from the store, not his cell phone. He says to the guy at the store, can I use your phone? He takes the guy's friggin' landline, calls Lynn up and says, there's this box set, and I think you should buy it for me for Valentine's Day. And so me and the record store guy are just razzing Glenn about that while he's on the phone with Lynn. But she says, She says, "Yep." And so we bought it. So Glenn probably spent easily $300.
Wow, he didn't
$200
say.
bucks. I don't know. It was quite a bit. I spent
Yeah,
almost.
he didn't mention that on his video.
I spent about $100. I still got to make my video. I picked up like I think I got like 5 or 6 records, one new and then some old stuff. So nothing like earth shattering, but yeah. So what are we saying in the comments here? James is saying, will the new Taylor Swift album be more like Midnights or Folklore Evermore? That's hard to say. I mean, it's interesting because not that I give a flying fart about all of her relationships and entanglements and affairs and what, I don't care. She is hey FVA, how you doing? She's a musician to me and I like the music. I don't care what inspired the songs. But they always say, you don't want to date Taylor Swift because she's going to write a song about you. Well, if you read the track list for this new album, I mean it's not one I hate you song about her past partner. It's a whole damn album. Like, I mean, she's just going to take him to town. So, hey Sam, how you doing?
Howdy, boys. I'm good.
So I don't know. I think it's gonna be kind of a Midnights kind of thing. I was hoping that she would just out of the blue do a rock album. Why not? Like,
Well,
no reason she couldn't.
who knows? I mean, it could be. She is a tortured poet, Rob.
Well,
she can do whatever she wants, man. She's chairman of the department.
She
It's
can
gotta be-
shit. She
it's
can
gotta
shit
be
in a
tough.
cereal. She can shit in a cereal box, and I'd buy it.
Yeah,
So,
I think most of her fans would say that.
yep. And
I
then
think that's why she's so popular.
maybe. And then there's Sam. How you doing, Sam? What's up?
Well, I was doing all right until I heard the conversation.
Hey, the Walnut Gallery started it. They asked, so we got to give the viewers what they want.
I'll see Cardboard Head Guy. He's led the charge there.
Now,
number
did you
one.
get the Final Jeopardy tonight, Sam?
No, I answered just like two of the other champions, and I didn't get it.
Wow.
What was the question?
It had something to do with the ancient wonders, and it was essentially something like this. Like somebody said that this looked like a mountain with a sun on top, and everybody said the Colossus of Rhodes because the Colossus had the torch.
I always said the Ziggurat of Ur.
No.
What was the answer?
I don't remember. I was pulling
Machu Picchu.
I'm a history guy, so I probably would have had a shot at it.
But only U.S. history.
Well, I mean, I specialized in that in World War II, but I've taken several ancient history courses, so it's not totally out of my wheelhouse. John is saying that there is no artist other than Billy Joel that he would buy their shit in a cereal box. Well, I don't know what to tell you, man.
What a great collector's edition that would be. Yeah.
Wouldn't it, though?
I think John would try it at least because John, he's very open-minded to listening to the new cats in town.
Right. And John, it was proverbial. I wouldn't actually buy a box full of shit. So for those that are tuning in, which we've lost Glenn, so I guess we've lost some viewers here, but I'm sure they'll creep up.
He's okay.
He's okay. He's not
he's
dead. I met him yesterday for the first time, which was awesome.
And you couldn't convince him to stick around, huh?
Nah, he's like, fuck you guys, I'm out of here. No, Glenn has decided to take a indefinite hiatus from our Wednesday live chats. Glenn's got a lot going on. I mean, he travels occasionally to go see his daughter down in Florida, and he has a part-time job. And he's got, a new grandbaby that lives like an hour away. He's just got a lot of stuff going on, and he cranks out videos a lot. So
I'll say, but with the birth of his granddaughter, he forgot about his grandson because he hasn't seen me in like a year and a half.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
I see. Blood is not thicker than water. Apparently.
Do you feel neglected?
Very. I've got an out-of-tune banjo in the corner. It's just got like a teardrop coming out of it.
You should just smash it.
I should just call me Ace Frehley.
Yeah, exactly. So Glenn would like the four of us, even though Jason's not here, because Jason's working tonight, so he sucks. But Jason wants the four of us to soldier on and carry the torch. So I'll be hosting it here on my channel. and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure we'll be fine. I mean, it's this, as I said in my community post, same people, same nonsense. So it's us. So there's only the three of us tonight because Jason's working. But we thought that in honor of Glenn's leaving the band, that is exactly what we would talk about tonight. We thought we would talk about albums from bands that have had lineup changes, and does that positively or negatively affect the band, or did it have any influence at all? And we've all pulled some records to chat about. So that's Alex says he's pulled 1,700 records. So if you and I don't have anything, Sam, Alex can probably lead the whole show. But
yeah,
I will. Who wants to go first?
I think Alex should go first because
he's got 1,700. He better go first.
Yeah, I better get some of these out of the way. Well, a couple different ways, obviously, to approach this. We're thinking of some classic lineups, but I think like the idea is like maybe Rob, you might have alluded to it, like the before and after. Like, what was it? A significant change on paper? Was it a significant change, afterwards? Was it a change really early on that it's like, does Ringo Starr fit into this conversation? It's like what it's so there's a lot of different ways to go. But I pulled a number of different bands. I'm going to start proggy because I know it's Rob and Sam's favorite genre, and I'm hoping I can do some educating on them.
Well, say hopefully you pulling these records, like whatever this record is, that way I can just eliminate it from my pile because I've already pulled it.
That's fair. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
And you're not going to teach me anything about prog, Alex. Come on.
Right, that's true.
It's hard to teach the teacher. I mean, let's be honest.
I'm like Yoda.
So actually, I pulled a lot of prog, like the biggest prog bands and a couple other ones, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. Well, I'm going to start off with something I think it's a little bit funny. Now, the thing is with a lot of these prog bands, most of them went through a ton of lineup changes, right? So you can focus on a number of things of, they replaced the keyboardist there, or they got rid of this guitarist and replaced him with so-and-so. But this one I feel like was such an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people thought this was going to work. I think upon release of the actual album, a lot of people were like, this is not my thing. But I think history has treated it well. In their discography of 20-some-odd albums, this has become one of my favorites, referring to the replacement album. But the band I'm talking about is Yes. Arguably the most well-known, most prolific, progressive rock band of all time. And we're going to fast forward, rewind back to 1978. This is a record called Tornado or Tornado. Pretty just brutal album cover as a whole. You have the tomatoes kind of going on, but I don't know if those are like drumsticks or chopstick. It's just there's just a lot here. But this was certainly, I think, at this era of Yes, kind of going downhill. They started getting more and more poppy. This, I think, history has treated this one okay. I think more people like this now than they might have then. But at this point in the game, people were kind of over it. People knew that a change was needed. All the different things. So, start playing for the follow-up, whatever it was. Rick Wakeman, the keyboardist, and John Anderson, the singer, end up leaving. So what do you do when you're arguably the biggest progressive rock band in the world and your keyboardist and your singer end up leaving?
You hire Kid Rock.
I tell you what you do, boys. You call up you call up the Buggles, not the Bengals. That would be hilarious. But you call up the Buggles. That's right. You call up the Buggles. So at the time, 1979, the Buggles, they had Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs were leading the game with Video Killed the Radio Star, right? The first video that was ever showed on MTV, 1979, absolutely blew up. They're a poppy new wave band. There's no reason that this should work. But they call up Jeff Downs, they call up Trevor Horn, they come in and they release this record, 1980, called Drama, or as the Canadians will call it, Drama. And this smokes. This has become one of probably a top, I'll go 5, 6. I'll go 5 or 6, which is pretty good when you're talking about a discography this big. I've talked about this a little bit, but it kicks off with Machine Messiah, which to me is the best opening to NES record ever. Again, should not really work the way it does. Like, I remember people are like, wait, Trevor Horn, Jeff Downs, like from the Buggles, from the Video Killed the Radio Star.
I didn't know that.
Yes, those. So, my first one, and this was sort of like a one album wonder with that, with said lineup. But I love drama, and just a really kind of cool, I think, story of just the random lineup change before and after. 90125 would follow here in a couple years after this, and put them back hugely on the map, of course, with Owner of a Lonely Heart, which was a huge track, amongst some other things. So, first pick is going to be Yes, with like their 40th reincarnation of the band, but certainly that change in 1979, bringing in Jeff Downs and Trevor Horn for this record.
Good one. Sam.
It's good stuff. I'm trying to figure out which direction I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna start with this. Just because this is a three-piece, like not a three-piece in terms of a band, but like just like these three albums, boom, 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 key member gone, key member gone, key member gone. And the difference in these three albums is striking. I'm going to be talking here for a couple minutes about, and I pulled a lot of CDs tonight because that's all I have for these guys, the Byrds. Even this album, so the Byrds, obviously one of the, great groups of the 60s. They had the British invasion sound, but, were based out of California, hanging out with all the Laurel Canyon folks, in that time. You had Gene Clark, Roger McGuinn, Chris Hillman, Michael Clark, and David Crosby doing the original quintet. Gene Clark, not Michael. Gene leaves after 2 albums, and he was their principal songwriter, until he was gone, and then the other guys had to step up. So fast forward to this being their 4th album, Younger Than Yesterday. This is the last album that's featuring Crosby, Michael Clark, McGuinn, and Hillman as a quartet. And actually Gene Clark does come back for like a song or 2 on this album, but he was like kind of uncredited on the original. Big hits on here, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, Time Between. Chris Hillman was really stepping up as a songwriter here. So you had some of those like, jangly country kind of tunes, but with a Beatley edge. You had My Back Pages on here, the Dylan cover. Mind Gardens. You kind of had some trippy stuff with like Renaissance Fair. So this is like a full-on 60s, record. All 3 of the main guys are writing and singing, and it's just a really, really cool record. Actually, it's my favorite of the early Byrds records, of what I'm calling the early, lineup.
Early Byrds.
Yeah.
They getting that morning worm.
Okay. All right. We can mute people, Rob, as host.
I can do that. Watch this. Where is he? How do I do this now? Watch this. There we go.
Now we can say all those naughty words.
That's right.
So this is the album right after Younger Than Yesterday. And you can't really see my lighting, but the cover is there's a Hillman, McGuinn, and Michael Clark. And then there's a horse here, which a lot of people say is the representation of David Crosby. Crosby's on this record, but he was kicked out, fired during the production, and Michael Clark left very shortly afterward. Actually, I don't even think Clark is on all of the songs on the drums on this record. So McGuinn was kind of becoming like a taskmaster, according to the other guys. He was really wanting to get his sound. And this album, which is Notorious Byrd Brothers, kind of flows as like one-ish piece. They've got great stuff on here, like, Wasn't Born to Follow, Natural Harmony, Artificial Energy, Old John Robertson. Weird stuff like Dolphin Smile, which is kind of like a experiment with like the Moog synthesizer. But this album, and when this album came out, all you had left were McGuinn and Hillman. So again, a year's time, you've gone from 4 original Byrds down to 2. And so what does that turn into on the 3rd album? And I promise I'm almost done with the Byrds. They jump to this little record right here, Sweetheart of the Rodeo.
I think I might have heard of it.
Between 1967 and then this is sometime in 68. I can't remember exactly when it came out in 68. They pick up what's his name? Scott Kelly, I think was his name. And a guy named Graham Parsons, who you might have heard of. And so you have McGuinn, Hillman, the 2 original Byrds, put out a full-on country record, where their album just before this with Notorious Byrd Brothers is almost like a psych record. with some, again, the country elements are there of what they were turning into, but this is nothing like those last two records or the three albums that came before that. It's just unbelievable the progression that they made in that amount of time. And then I didn't bring it, but after this record, Hillman leaves. He joins the Flying Burrito Brothers, and McGuinn is left solo with some other studio guys, including Clarence White, for about 4 or 5 other records. So the Byrds just went through incredible lineup changes after this album. Even this album wasn't a success initially. They started really declining in popularity. They lost that jangly sound, but they did, press on without, 4 of the original members. I mean, it was McGuinn's baby at the very end, other than that reunion album, which we don't have to talk about, from the early 70s. But yeah, I could, again, talk a long time about the Byrds, but I thought they were just a prime example of a band that just continued morphing over time. So
good one. Gonna make me big now. Okay, I'm gonna show 2 records that I've never shown before by a band I've never shown before. And I feel like I shouldn't be the one to show this because Sam is far more the expert on this band than I am. However, I'm going to give you my opinion, then Sam can tell me I'm wrong. The Beach Boys.
Ooh.
I have a ton of Beach Boys records. I don't ever talk about them. This is Little Deuce Coupe, which was their, correct me if I'm wrong, 4th album, Sam, I think.
Yeah, that was one of those weird ones like Shut Down. That was kind of like,
well, Shut Down was before that, and Shut Down Volume 2 was after it. But Shut Down Volume 1 was a comp that they only had 2 songs on, something like that. So the reason I show this is the last album with David Marks, was guitar player, who was replaced by Al Jardine, who he originally replaced. So
because Al was originally, he's on a couple of tracks on Surfer Girl, he's playing on Surfer Girl.
He played on a few songs at the very beginning, and then it was replaced by David Marks for, I think, about 4 albums. And then David quit and Al replaced him again. And he was replaced on the very next album by Al Jardine. And the next album is this one here, Shut Down Volume 2. And that's Al right there. And there's David on the back there. And if I have my Beach Boys history right, the reason that David quit is he was really young. He was 15 or 16.
He was 2 or 3 years younger than Carl. Yeah.
Right. So he was kind of I'm a little too young to, be doing this rock and roll thing, is what I've read. So what do I make of that lineup change? And this is where Sam will probably tell me I'm wrong, but David Marks is an absolutely incredible guitar player. Even at 15 years old, he played amazing surf guitar, which is kind of important for Beach Boys music.
He might have even been 13.
He might have been. I think when when Surfer Girl came out, I think he was 13. Yep. Yeah. Phenomenal surf guitar player. And when you watch him, especially when he rejoined them for the 50th anniversary, man, obviously he's 50 years later, but he plays surf guitar, and Al doesn't play surf guitar. He just kind of plays 60s rock guitar. Yeah. So they lose when David left. They lost a vastly superior guitar player, but I think you gained Al, who was a much better singer than David was.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's my opinion. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. You're more.
Very much. Yeah, David kind of has because he did I think he sang "Get You Back" on the 50th. It's kind of a baritone kind of voice. And actually, I think because Al kind of took over what Carl was playing, and then Carl took lead.
Right.
The guitar. Yep.
So, I think it's kind of you change one for the other, but it doesn't weaken the band, but it doesn't strengthen the band either. You've just, you've traded a shortstop for a second baseman. It's kind of, in my opinion, what it is. The band certainly didn't suffer from it. They went on to make some absolutely incredible music. And I think largely that's because of the genius of Brian Wilson and what he was able to create with the help of, session musicians and all that other stuff. But to me, an interesting lineup change in the very formative years of this band's career when, they're legitimately, duking it out with the Beatles at this point in time. They've got, this is the American band on Capitol, and then you've got this British band on Capitol. They're on the same label, and they're trying to sort of fight for superiority. And Beach Boys losing, obviously, but interesting time for lineup change, and didn't make a difference.
No, I wouldn't say, and I mean, I might piggyback off of that with one of my other picks later on. Wink, wink. But
steal your thunder. Sorry.
No. It's going to work out well, actually. Yeah, those early albums, I mean, they were pumping out 2 or 3 a year,
right?
At that point, and those records are only like 25, 27 minutes long,
something like that. They're short.
But yeah, I mean, because David was much more mature than he let on, and he's actually, like, I would consider him to be the forgotten Beach Boy, because
that's actually what his autobiography was called, like the Lost Beach Boy.
Oh, really? I need to read that. Because he stood up to Murray Wilson, who was their producer, and for those that don't know, Brian, Carl, and Dennis's father, who was like a taskmaster of a producer. But yeah, David was like, "Nah, I'm out of here." Al was like in dental school or something, and he came back. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, Al, I mean, even now in his early 80s, Al sounds almost exactly like he did when he was 18 years old on those early Beach Boys records. So no, I don't think it didn't change their sound by any means, but it gave Al those times to sing lead on songs that David might not have. But yeah, that's a good pick.
Sam may touch on this later. I don't know. Holland, the Beach Boys lineup, that was a great
I love that. I love Holland.
Yep. Glenn Campbell was a Beach Boy, as was John Cowsill. Yes, John Cowsill is currently their drummer, and I'm friends with his nephew, who was Billy Cowsill's son. And
this always happens, Rob.
And John Cowsill is married to Vicky Peterson. And Vicky Peterson is the lead guitarist of the Bengals, which is the band of my celebrity wife, Susanna Hoffs. So I'm hoping someday maybe we can, pull some strings and make some stuff happen. But
a little menage a quad.
No, I just want to meet Susanna Hoffs.
Oh, okay.
We won't comment on that. All right. Alex, you ready for round 2?
Yeah. More prog or more rock? What do you want?
Whatever you want, man.
Okay. Well, I'll get another prog one out the way, because I'm prepping for, Rob, actually, kind of a toss back to you. If you remember, we were having a conversation maybe a month or so ago when I was doing my prog tag. And I mentioned Scott Lade over at the Prog Corner, and jokingly was like, yeah, maybe I'll reach out to him and email him about it. And you were like, why not, dude? Just do it. Just do it.
Do it.
So I did. And now I've been on the Prog Corner the last 3 weeks. So,
you're welcome.
Shoot your shot, as they say.
Right.
For most people, that means romantically. But for people like Sam and I, that just means trying to get on YouTube.
You've got it wrong.
Happy Valentine's Day.
What you need, the quote, actually, Alex, from the great one, Mr. Wayne Gretzky, is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yeah,
that's it. It's true. So we've been, so Scott over the Prog Corner, for the millions of Prog fans out there, you probably know, I mean, Scott's become kind of like one of the YouTube leaders in the Prog conversations. And every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, he has a live stream, and I've been on the last few weeks. And recently they've been counting down our favorite songs from some of the mega progressive rock bands. And the one I'm prepping for this Sunday, of course, is for arguably the best, and that is Genesis. Now, I'm showing a couple of different things here. I'm not going to count the very, very early lineup changes before Phil Collins was in the band or anything like that, but specifically, again, the sort of before and after. So this is Genesis, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the final album featuring Peter Gabriel. This is their big double release concept record. Kind of a silly story, but they all usually are. 1974, Peter Gabriel decides, you know what, he wants to go off and do more creative things, which ultimately he would end up doing. And Genesis is sitting there going, well, now what do we do? And Phil Collins says, well, I'll just do both. I'll play drums, and I will also be the lead singer. I sound similar. I've been doing backing vocals, all that kind of stuff. So this was 74, and the next album to come out would be Trick of the Tail. So this is the first studio record without Peter Gabriel. This is now when they're down to a quartet. And you know what? I think a lot of people, a lot of the classic prog fans, a lot of them will say, I only prefer the Gabriel stuff. I only want the Gabriel stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I put this maybe not quite to that level, but it's really, really darn close in my opinion. The two records they did post Gabriel, this one and then Wind and Wuthering that would come the same year. These were both in 76. I think are absolutely outstanding. Phil's incredible, regardless of what he would come later in his career. At this point in his career, Phil Collins was one of the absolute best artists and musicians on the planet. And so still hugely progressive band. They sound very similar, all that. Great stuff. But I also want to point out that to me, losing Peter Gabriel was not the hit to Genesis that a lot of people think it was. Because again, this record, Wind and Wuthering, I think are incredible albums. And if they would have kept doing that, I think they would have been continued down that sort of path. The issue was not Peter Gabriel leaving in 74. The issue for me was Steve Hackett leaving around 76, right after Wind and Wuthering. And then they go down to this record called And Then There Were Three, which is now just Tony Banks, Phil Collins, and Mike Rutherford. And so this then sort of begins their pop sort of ways. Still some progressive elements here, but very clearly the writing is on the wall with where they're going. This was sort of the first big one that had Follow You, Follow Me on it. That became a huge hit. And then all their subsequent records after this were all still had some progressive elements, but were mostly obviously really leaning into some of that pop stuff after Steve Hackett had left. Cool tie-in is, Steve Hackett. Yeah, great point, Christopher. And it's cool that we're doing our top 10 Genesis songs on Scott's channel on Sunday, because he just interviewed Steve Hackett earlier this week, which was super cool. So, I want to give a shout out. Underrated gems. A lot of people gave up on this because it would have Peter Gabriel, but this is still great. And then obviously when they start getting here and it goes to 3-piece. Yeah. And Steve, I know I've heard you make that comment before too. That's when you kind of got into them and then worked backwards a little bit. But yeah, once you get to this point and onward, that's where it sort of became almost indecipherable between Genesis and Phil Collins solo and what they were doing in the mid 80s. So yeah.
Steve.
You're up, Sam.
Steve, I'm interested now. I'm gonna jump on what Rob was talking about. I was gonna say this for later, but it kind of works in with what Rob was talking about. And for those that were tuning in, Rob was talking about early Beach Boys records where David Marks left and Al Jardine took his place. I'm going to kind of take a different route. So obviously, flash forward to, was it 65? Brian Wilson, goes through some anxiety and panic attacks and decides that he wants to remove himself from the touring unit of the Beach Boys. And so with that, they hire somebody mentioned earlier, Glenn Campbell, for a couple of months, who was a friend of theirs through the Wrecking Crew, who they'd worked with a few times. He played for a few months until they got their permanent replacement with Bruce Johnston, who is obviously, still with Mike Love and Mike Love's version of the Beach Boys. And Bruce had a small solo career before he left the Beach Boys for a few years during the 70s.
He won a Grammy for Disney Girls.
And then
it's a terrible song, but
I write the songs. He wrote that for Barry Manilow as well, but that's not the direction I'm going. So, and what's really cool is that Bruce Johnston's first recording, if I'm not mistaken, was California Girls.
I think you're right.
Which was a single. But what's a travesty is that Bruce Johnston is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Beach Boys. And just think about everything that he played on with the Beach Boys. And you look at these other people that, are like members like from, I don't know, like Green Day, for example, like their first drummer made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was on one record. Yeah,
you make a good point, I guess.
And I mean, Johnson
I can't get past Bruce Johnston being Mike Love's lapdog. He just grates on me. He's a little yes man. I can't.
I'm not a fan of Bruce by any means. He's like the Timothy Schmidt of the Eagles, in my opinion. But
that's fair.
but with that, what the direction I'm going to go is with a lineup change. I'm going to go with the Bruce Johnston route, but referring to the fact that Brian left the touring unit to make this album. So Brian leaves, the Beach Boys go and tour, I think, Japan.
Yep.
And because Brian's like, I'm going to stay behind. He's got all these like instrumentals that he was already working on. And what's funny is the album just before this was Beach Boys Party, which is like this hodgepodge of, studio trickery to make it sound like the Beach Boys were having this like house party playing, Barbara Ann and like covers of 50 songs and things like that. It's really sloppy.
Terrible.
But Brian had already been doing work with like production. Like if you listen to the Beach Boys Christmas album from '64, Brian was doing like all of those orchestral parts on the second side, which are more traditional Christmas songs. And that was when Brian was really starting to become a whiz in the studio. So what I can't help but think is like with Brian leaving the touring unit, which I'm sure would just crush the other guys. Cause I mean, he's their leader. He's the high falsetto, like that made the Beach Boys sound. And, I'm sure, Bruce and Glenn Campbell did fine those early years, but Brian leaving the touring Beach Boys to make albums like Pet Sounds and then to go into the Smile sessions in late 1966 and 67, then him just completely breaking down and pulling himself back.
And add to that, right? So they go to Japan and they have no idea what he's up to. They know he's in the studio. They come back, and by all accounts, when they heard what he had worked on while they were away, I mean, Mike Love's an asshole, but they kind of went, what the hell is this shit?
Like, why do you need us? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you're right. It's kind of a weird dynamic.
It's a weird dynamic. Obviously, I mentioned they'd worked with the Wrecking Crew before, and for anybody in the chat doesn't know, they were the studio musicians in LA, like with Capitol Records. It's hard to imagine what the Beach Boys would have done had Brian not left the touring unit. How much longer would they have gone with surf songs? I don't think they would have stuck with surf songs much longer anyway. Because they just couldn't if they wanted sales. Like 67, 68, there's no way they could have kept going that route. But I think this is one of the most significant lineup changes when they added Bruce Johnston. Had 6 members of the band, although Bruce isn't on the cover because of contractual obligations he had with another record label. I believe he couldn't be on the album cover, but he's on the back cover. But it's just an incredible moment in music. This is, for those that don't know, this is my favorite album of all time. God Only Knows is my favorite song of all time. Just a significant lineup changes. Bruce didn't add much musically to the Beach Boys, but with his addition, Brian was able to stay behind and put this stuff to tape. And it was just, an incredible moment to be also 24 years old, which I always felt like a bum at 24 comparing, this and Bob Dylan putting out songs like a Rolling Stone when he was 24, and I was just sitting at home looking for jobs.
Well, you're an underachiever, Sam.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't make you feel much better today at 30, though, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Try 46, fellas.
I'm 29.
Well, time's ticking.
On that, Rob.
All right.
We changed the lineup in this live stream.
Steve says, in all seriousness, is there a more diverse album than Pet Sounds? For me, 2 good songs, and I'm not the only person that feels that way.
No, Glenn feels that way too.
That's why Steve and Glenn get along so well.
I'm kind of in the middle. I love like 75% of it. And there's about 25% of it I'm like, So, yeah, I get what you're saying, Steve.
It's one of my 10 albums that gets a 10 out of 10.
71, the Beach Boys got Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fitard and made Carl and the Passions. So tough, and Holland.
And they will say that the
Trevor being a smarty, the answer would be not at all.
And they'll say, so when Carl and the Passions came out with that, the twofer in 71 or whatever it was, they will say that is the best sounding pressing.
Yep.
Pet Sounds. ever, maybe prior to like Analog Productions, of course, did some stuff over the last several years. They'll say, you don't even know, don't worry about the original mono or the original stereo. If you want the best sounding Pet sounds, it's in the twofer with Carl and Passions.
I've heard that. Now I'm always looking for it, but I think it's a hard one to find.
Okay, that makes me up next. All right. So I'm going to go with the band, a legendary band that is, I would argue, as known for their lineup changes as they are for the music. And that is Fleetwood Mac.
I was about to pull it, but I thought you'd take it.
This is Then Play On. So Fleetwood Mac had, 5-ish lineups. So the original, for those that don't know, I'm sure most folks on here do because we're all kind of record people. The first Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. They were a British blues band. John McVie and Mick Fleetwood are the common thread that runs through all of Fleetwood Mac, and thus the name of the band. But they were a blues band. And then after Peter Green left, this one is the last Peter Green album, I believe, and the first one with Danny Kerwin. And there was kind of a transitional lineup there when Christine joined. And then there was the once those guys left, it was, the Fleetwood Mac that most folks know, the Rumors era lineup, as it's called. And then in the 80s, Lindsay and Stevie left. And then there was that one-off lineup for Time with Becca Bramlett and Dave Mason and Billy Burnett, which I love that album. Everyone else in the world hates it. And then the reunited Rumors lineup. So that band has gone through many, many shifts. But I'm going to talk about, how we go from Then Play On, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, to, the mammoth Fleetwood Mac that everyone knows. And I don't know that you could answer the question, was that lineup change better? Did they make the band better? Because they're so fundamentally different. You went from a blues band to essentially a top 40 AOR sort of
pop rock
band. So you can't say which one's better. And there are a lot of folks who dismiss the Rumors era lineup because it's commercial. Those people that say, oh, it can't be good because it's commercial, I know what I'd like to say to you. But just because it's commercial doesn't mean it's bad. So I think this was one of the biggest lineup changes in the history of music, aside from, Van Halen or GNR, arguably, because this went from an incredibly awesome blues band to a band that made one of the most successful selling albums of all time. And I mean, this is the first this is the album before Rumors, but I mean, just about everyone has a copy of Rumors. It's one of those records that is virtually in everybody's collection. So it's a lineup change that didn't make the band better or worse. It was a seismic shift in the kind of music they made, and obviously made them bazillionaires, but big change. Let's see.
And it's interesting too, is that, I mean, I think one of the, is it possible, maybe you're alluding to this, I really love all eras.
Me too.
Of them, right? That middle, Bob Welch section, I love Bare Trees and Future Games and all that. I think are just very, nothing else really sounds like that. And so, it's interesting that, throughout all the eras, they're so distinctively different. It's not just oh, here's a little minor tweak and now they're more poppy. It's they are so completely different throughout all those eras.
Yep. James makes a point that there are many Fleetwood Macs that don't know there was anything before this album.
I mean, that's their debut.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Most folks don't know there is another self-titled Fleetwood Mac album, which was the first Fleetwood Mac album. He goes, I discovered the Peter Green era much later on. I discovered the Peter Green Fleetwood Mac first because it's my dad's favorite band, and I've talked about it before. So I was hearing all of those. And I actually discovered Rumors on my own, and initially that was what led me into Fleetwood Mac, because at 14 years old, I didn't appreciate the blues stuff when I was getting into music. I love it now. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But like everybody, Rumors was kind of my gateway. But I knew about all of the Peter Green stuff because my dad had it, played it all the time. So yes, Steve, you missed. Yes. So if you rewind to the beginning, you can hear him talk about it.
Well, this is the one I went with. I mean, I could have gone with a million of them, but I went with Formato to Drama. And I should have included, the one after 90138 or 90128, but I forgot.
Santana, another band with big lineup changes. I have some Santana, but I didn't pull them to talk about today. Carly says, no, I only have Tusk. And Tusk is a interesting album. I like it. So there are some folks that think it's an overproduced, bloated Lindsey Buckingham project. So,
they can be both.
Steve says, I'm with Alex. I love all versions of Mac. I even think Time is good. Steve, you are the first person that number one, knows what I'm talking about when I talk about the Fleetwood Mac Time album. And you're the first person I know that likes it. I have a story that my dad died 14 years ago in a very horrific fashion, quite unexpectedly. And when I got home that night after witnessing his passing, music was I'm just like, I have to go listen to something because obviously I can't sleep. I've been through the most traumatic experience of my life. And that just happened to be the first Fleetwood Mac album that I grabbed. And it's even to this day, 14 years later, it's incredibly therapeutic to me. I absolutely love that record.
Yeah.
The self-titled is great. Both of the self-titled Fleetwood Mac albums are great.
Did you see Lindsey just spoke up the other day that he's still, he kind of did some digs at Stevie, but he said he's still open to playing one more time.
I hope it happens. I mean, I like the current lineup and maybe it's another one-off lineup with Neil Finn and Mike Campbell. I like that, but I'd still like to see Lindsey back with.
And Mike Campbell will be the first person to hand his guitar over.
Of course he would,
and he said that before.
Yeah, he knows he's just a fill-in.
Well, that's like one thing that I really respect too, and we're going off subject, and I doubt any of us are going to talk about Journey, but we might. I'm not.
Alex probably will.
Well, not anymore, apparently.
Okay.
We'll put those records back.
Well, I'll hold off then.
No, go ahead, Sam. I think he's being facetious.
No, well, they're just like the current singer Arnell. He's even said, he's been with Journey now for what, like 15, 20 years almost.
Something like that.
He still says, he's like, I would gladly retire my position to give it back to Steve Perry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Alex, talk about Neil Schon and the Journey boys.
Yeah, I wish. All right, let's
one quick comment here. James says he doubts Mac will be back after the passing of Christine McVie. And you might be right, because Mick Fleetwood has kind of said that. Yeah. However, there was a Fleetwood Mac Rumors era without Christine. They did the official last Fleetwood Mac album was Say You Will without Christine McVie, because she went through that period where she couldn't fly because she was having wicked anxiety. So there was a version of that Fleetwood Mac, and maybe they'll do something, but I don't know. You're up, Alex. Sorry.
All right, I'll jump out of the prog world a little bit and go more heavy, as it were. Arguably, the greatest, most popular metal band of all time is Black Sabbath, and obviously Black Sabbath has always been synonymous with, Ozzy Osbourne, right?
You're perking Steve up right now.
Well, I got I got Sabbath over here. I got Deep Purple over here, which I'm going to say something wrong when I talk about Deep Purple, so I'm just whatever. But God, those first, to me, the first 6 Sabbath records to me are as good as you can get for a first 6. I mean, just amazing, right? Like I would put their first 6 up against any other first 6 in discographies, but after that first 6, it starts going a little bit haywire. The cocaine really starts kicking in. You guys know, well, Rob, you don't partake, but like there's like when you're playing like the bar games, so like billiards or darts or bowling, like the lazy people games, and there's like the perfect element of tipsy where you're just on fire, like you can do no wrong.
You're upset you knocked bowling, asshole. Like, fuck you.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Is like you could be like the perfect amount of tipsy and you're a killer bowler, but as soon as you teeter over that ledge, it's like, oh, the point of no return, like not coming back. I feel like that's how Sabbath was in the mid '70s. It was like,
got a bowling pin right here just for you, man.
Hey, we could talk about that. My dad was a professional amateur bowler.
So am I.
He made the Sweet 16 in college. We got to talk. All right. But it's like, give me that Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, that sabotage cocaine. That's the good stuff. But it's after that that things start going a little bit haywire and sort of comes to a big halt with this classic Never Say Die. This is such a good record. I have it. No, I don't know how time has treated this. I guess a polarizing, but I think the vast majority of the Sabbath yes. Oh, very good, Steve. Appreciate that. This was the downfall, right? I mean, this was Never Say Die, but you had Technical Ecstasy before this that was, some people do like them, but at the same time, it was like, I don't know. So I think a lot of people at this point were like, is the Sabbath career over? Obviously, they part ways with Ozzy. Ozzy's going to go start his solo career. And meanwhile, they sort of connect with a guy who is coming from a great partnership in Rainbow with Richie Blackmore, and enter Black Sabbath 2.0, the heavier, the faster, whatever you want to call it, and enter 1980, where they release Heaven and Hell with Ronnie James Dio singing. And I always wonder, I was not alive in 1980. Steve, I think you and I have maybe talked about this a couple of times, but so I don't know exactly what Black Sabbath pure Ozzy-driven Black Sabbath fans were thinking when this came around, and they're like, Ronnie James Dio joined Black Sabbath. But being not a part of that generation and just simply being able to look back on it, I'm going to put these two records, Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, I'm going to put these two just as good as those first six. Just as good. I mean, sure, if I were to do a ranking, maybe I could figure it out. But to me, it's like, I would have a hard time. These to me feel right in there. Totally. And that's with Ronnie James Dio singing on both of these. Again, heavier, faster. I'm sitting there thinking, like, the first time in 1980 that I would have dropped this Black Sabbath needle on this and hearing Neon Nights, my mind would have been blown at this. And thinking about things like Technical Ecstasy or Never Say Die and being like, oh, like, now they're here to party. So, yeah, I'm all in on this era. I'm also all in on the Born Again record, which is where they got Ian Gillan to come in from Deep Purple, which came next in 1983. But yeah, I love these records a ton. Again, that's also coming from a perspective of not being around when that lineup change happened, but also sometimes it's better to be able to look back a little bit more objectively in that way and saying, I don't know, they're just really damn good records. But yeah, I mean, these two just insane. And I mean, what an album cover this is, by the way.
Let's see it. Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, for 81, shoot. I'm on Rob's channel, so I'm going to say shoot.
You can say shit.
All right. Well, I was just talking about that good cocaine, so.
Hey, man, whatever.
So,
whatever gets...
for the uninitiated like myself, how many records were there from when Ozzy left when he came back?
Well, I guess he would have come back. Somebody helped. Well, I'm going to go ahead and lean on a Trevor or a Steve here or a James.
So were there just the two with Ronnie?
They did the two with Ronnie, and then they did Dehumanizer in the late 80s with Ronnie. But I believe it would have been the Reunion record, I think, was the first with Ozzy, which was that Forbidden, because they also had a whole era with Tony Martin as well. So I think, was it Forbidden People that was the first with Ozzy? Help me out on that one. But yeah, I'm not sure. But it was much later, at least in the mid to late 90s.
Oh, okay. Is that about the same time he was touring with them, or did he tour a few years before they decided to record again?
Don't know that much about that history. Can't tell you.
Well, what good are you?
I don't know.
No, it's very interesting, man.
What's Steve saying? Tech X was a shock. The system when it came out, but like I said, but I like it. And NSD, even though I love Elf and Rainbow, I completely rejected H&H and Mob when they came out. Did not buy either until around 2000. So there you go.
And that's why I say that, right? Like I totally admit, like, being around and being a fan of the band at the time and then feeling like, you know, this isn't my band anymore. You know, I can totally understand that. And then it's like I have no emotional connection to the Ozzy period. I just like those records, you know, but there's no, you know, emotion there. And so I think it allows you to go into that whole catalog with a little bit of a different emotion.
Fair. Sam.
All right. What I'm hoping is I'm knocking out the ones that I know a lot about first before I move into my kind of non-fanboy albums that I still enjoy. So I'm going to talk kind of like the Byrds. I'm going to talk about the Monkees because that's what I do. Although, unfortunately, I'm missing the transitional album between lineup changes, as it were. So, again,
I can't believe you're missing Monkees anything.
You'd be surprised. I'm missing one of the studio records, and then missing a few of the comps, like the demos and the missing link stuff. But so the Monkees were together until they put out the movie Head, which was supposed to be like the breakup of the Monkees, like to show that they were manufactured and all that stuff. It was kind of their idea of a weird, trippy, psychedelic movie. They put out a soundtrack, which was really good. I like it a lot. And then Peter Tork left the Monkees because he was done. He didn't re-sign his contract, or he bought himself out of his contract. That's what it was. Paid a lot of money to get out of it with CBS and Cole Gems Studios. So then the Monkees put out an album called Present. Nobody really knows. With the three of them, Mike, Davey, and Mickey. And that has some great Mike tunes on it. It starts with one of my favorite Monkees songs, Good, Clean, Fun. And the reason I bring up this stuff is that, you know, up until that point, obviously the Monkees had always fought for control. They had to kind of balance the music out with the TV show. So like the music that they were putting out was going to be inserted into the TV show for, like, you know, scene editing and that sort of thing. And then obviously the show was canceled after just 2 seasons. They put out Monkees Present with the three, and then they put out the album right after that called Instant Replay, which again is that same lineup of Davey, Mickey, and Mike. And what's so cool about these records, and again, those that know me know I'm a huge Michael Nesmith fan. Mike is really taking over a lot of the songwriting because obviously up until, you know, the show ended, they were getting the big name songwriters of the time, you know, the Neil Diamonds, the Carole Kings, you know, whoever. And they still were, like, you know, the Boyce and Harts, but they were pulling really good stuff. Because James is mentioning something there. I disagree. I think the Monkees were as good, if not better, after Peter left because Mike took such a forefront. But great songs on this record, like Teardrop City, While I Cry, which is just an absolutely beautiful Mike Nesmith tune, and one that I was very fortunate to see them do on that reunion, on that farewell tour with him and Mickey. And again, I was able to see Mike about a month and a half before he passed away. Don't Listen to Linda, which is kind of a kooky Davy Jones song. Just the Game is an interesting Mickey Dolenz song. Don't Wait for Me is like almost sounds like Mike is singing like in this like speakeasy jazz club, but really, really interesting stuff. And I mean, I really, really liked this stuff after the show because it was really showing where Mike was going to go with the First National Band. But I mean, James mentioned they put out that album again. They put out Present, Instant Replay, and then Mike bought his contract out, and so they had a contractual obligation to put out one final album for Cole Gems. So you just have Davey and Mickey. And actually, it's funny. This photo is photoshopped. Mike was originally in it, and they photoshopped. Well, Photoshop, but you know they edited Mike out of the picture. And this is essentially it's made up of a lot of leftovers that date back to like 66 or so, and then a few newer tracks. And this came out in 1970, I believe. But really good stuff. Probably Davey's most rocking song, which is 99 Pounds. It's actually a really good song. I like it a lot. I mean, it's really so, Oh My, it's like this trippy kind of tune. Mickey Dolenz opener. Ticket on a Ferry Ride is very like breezy and dreamlike. It's really, really interesting. People give this album a hard time. I actually like it. I like it's got a feel to it. Again, kind of a dreamy feel to it. I mean, it is 50-50 Mickey and Davey. And I'm not a Davy Jones fan, but I do actually like this record. Probably, I would venture to say I like this record more than their second album, More of the Monkees, which has some huge hits on it. But yeah, I mean, the Monkees, I mean, you know, they would get back for reunions. They would do the album Pull It again without Mike. They did one final album as the Four when they were all still alive called Just Us. And then they did the two albums in the late 2010s, 20-teens. But the Monkees, they changed their sound. Mike was able to take more control. And I'm a big fan of those post TV show records. So I'm going to go with the Monkees. Again, another band I could talk a long time about, but I won't because
you got some high praise there, Sam. Richard says he's always impressed with how much you know about bands' histories, given what a young man you are. He's actually like Benjamin Button. Sam's actually 70, but he looks like he's 25.
I am. Yeah, when Alex came to visit me, he had to wheel me around. But no, seriously, in all seriousness, I appreciate that, Richard. I mean, I just, it's my thing. I soak it in.
And of course, there's Steve. Sam's a fountain of knowledge. Drink at your own peril.
Thanks, Dad.
James barely listens to the last three Monkees albums. I barely listen to any of the Monkees.
You're missing out. Those last three are really good.
Okay, my turn. Kind of along the same lines as Fleetwood Mac, I've got another band that is synonymous with lineup changes. The Eagles. Many lineup changes. But the one that I'm going to focus on is the one that transpired between One of These Nights and Hotel California. So I think One of These Nights is the fourth album, I think. Third or fourth?
Yes.
Fourth.
Yeah, it's the fourth.
Yeah, because the third album's on the border.
Yep.
This is the last album with Bernie Leadon as lead guitar player and one of the vocalists. And he was more into the country rock that the Eagles originally started. Like, their first, the self-titled album and Desperado were very country rock records. And then they started to drift a little more towards mainstream rock. And that was not something that Bernie Leadon wanted to do. He still wanted to play a banjo from time to time. And I think you could probably only put up with Henley and Fry being assholes for so long. I think that may also be a part of it as well. But he left after this album, and the next album was the one that everyone hates because it's so, monumental. It's, again, another one of those albums that probably everybody owns, Hotel California. He was replaced by Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh is my guitar hero. Love Joe Walsh. He's absolutely insane. He's lucky to be alive, the amount of drugs that has been in him, but he's an incredible guitar player. And this is, again, kind of not to the same degree as Fleetwood Mac, although went from blues to mainstream rock, but this really changed the Eagles' sound from a country rock band to a solid, top 40 radio. Yeah, a stadium rock band, and Joe's happy being the sideman, being the just shut up and play your guitar. I mean, he's fine doing that because I don't think Joe has the maturity to want to do anything more than that. So he's happy just kind of being the hired gun, and thankful he's still with the Eagles today, and he's doing stuff with James Gang again, which is great. But that's a lineup change, and they've had many other lineup changes. Randy Meisner left, was replaced by Tim Schmidt. Don Felder came and was fired, and But I think of all of the Eagles lineup changes, a lot of them are really not that noticeable. I mean, as much as Tim Schmidt sort of has the same vocal range as Randy Meisner, he doesn't sing nearly as well as Randy Meisner.
No.
But it really didn't change the Eagles' sound. But Bernie Leadon leaving and being replaced by Joe Walsh did have very broad implications for this band. And my opinion on it's a change for the positive, because I much like their more rock stuff and a little less of the countrified stuff. But there are people who prefer the earlier country sound of the Eagles. So depends what your preference is. But I think arguably that personnel change was the biggest in that band's history.
I heard Alex does a great version of Pretty Maids in a Row.
Oh, I love that song.
Hello, how are you?
He also does a really good version of Picture, don't you, Alex?
I do a good version of a couple of different tunes now, boy.
I'm sure.
No, I mean, as y'all can imagine, I'm a big fan of Bernie Leadon.
Me too. I like the guy.
Didn't
for
realize how much I'd liked him until, because our friend Rich Strickler sent me some VCLT of those first few CDs, and listening to them in their entirety. Because again, I was just an Eagles hits guy for a while, and hearing the Bernie songs, the instrumental stuff, like the Doolin Dalton stuff, and like that sort of stuff, like I'm like, yeah, man, this is top tier stuff. And obviously his brother, I've got to give his brother Tom Leadon, some props. He was in Mudcrutch with Tom Petty. So
I didn't know that.
oh yeah. He was the younger brother, just passed away last year.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Huh.
because Bernie was from Gainesville,
Right.
And Bernie and Tom, and they were, Mudcrutch was opening for like Leonard Skinner at the time.
Right.
And yeah, Tom Leadon, Leadon was with Tom Petty, and he's on both of those reunion Mudcrutch records. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Interesting. James says, I think one of these nights was a little on the weak side. He welcomes a change on Hotel California. I actually really like Hotel California, with the exception of the title track. I think just because I'm burnt out on it, I like everything else on the album. So I agree with what John says here. Joe Walsh was the best lineup change the Eagles ever made. I agree. Meisner left the Eagles in 77 to be replaced by Tim Schmidt. Yeah, I mentioned that a minute ago. And it's funny because Meisner left Poco to join the Eagles. And when he left the Eagles, Tim Schmidt, who's his replacement in Poco, left Poco to come to the Eagles. So I'm sure Poco was like, those goddamn Eagles keep stealing our baseball.
Well, that's kind of like back to the Burrito Brothers. I mean, they took, after
Right.
the rodeo, Graham Parsons and Hillman, and even Michael Clark, the drummer for the Birds, drummed with them a few times.
Yep.
Love will keep us alive.
Ooh. I feel like we're at a concert here.
I love that song.
It's a good song.
We had that played at our wedding, but it wasn't by it was a friend of mine that actually played it for us. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah. Was it that good? Was it as good as what I just did?
But nothing is that good. There's no.
That's the right answer, Rob.
I'm gonna snip that part out, and I'm gonna upload it on iTunes later so everyone can download it.
That's the title of the stream.
I mean, wow.
Although we might get flagged by Henley if we put that
We
up.
got a copyright strike. Rob can't afford another one.
I can't. I have one already. Damn it. At Brian Adams.
One by Brock. Oh man,
I've got one.
Rob gets his channel shut down by Brian Adams and Don Henley.
What a way to go out there, man.
Where you gonna go?
Speaking of Joe Walsh, the James Gang fits well into that
Jimmy
topic.
Gang.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I'm glad that he's doing some shows with the James Gang again. That would be good to see.
It's amazing. You look at Joe Walsh. He's aged very well for him,
Considering, yeah.
and
Man.
he's doing all that stuff with Ringo too. I mean, he's all over the place. He's a working man.
Steve says, I only saw the Eagles once in 75. Never saw a more boring band with such a great
Good
set
gosh.
list. Well, I wouldn't call them boring, but
Well,
Well, then we have to
what
ask
they
Steve.
say,
Steve,
opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one.
we start knowing these people enough. Steve, then the question for you is: who was more boring, the Eagles or Jackson Brown? Because I know how you feel about both in concert.
and Jackson Brown's just the Eagles' cousin, essentially.
Pretty much.
Joe Walsh did a 1 week stint on the Colbert Show. Yeah, I watched that because I love Joe Walsh. It looked like he was having a blast.
Joey Dubs.
All right. Alex.
That's me. Well, let's actually segue this from Joe Walsh to there it is. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
I wish there was, Rob, I wish there was a more seamless way to do that.
Right?
Because I've been on that side and there's got to be, right?
There has to
We got to be missing something.
You know what? Let's experiment. Let's experiment on the after show tonight.
You better bring your Crisco. Talking like that.
Dear Lord.
That is not what I meant. I probably won't be joining you then.
I was going to say, Sam wasn't in before, but he might be now.
Good God.
No, I'm canceling subscriptions tonight.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, great segue, right? We're talking Joe Walsh. We're talking James Gang. There's a James Gang connection here. I was nervous about doing this one because I know I got Steve in the audience, and Steve's a much.
You can just ignore
more...
Steve. It's no problem.
It's I just out of respect. It's out of pressure and it's out of respect for wanting to impress. All the things. Now, this is a band similar to what y'all were talking about, where it seems like the band has been incredibly prolific since I guess 1968. They really haven't gone on a ton of breaks. They've had some constant lineup changes. They've had some constant that have always been there. I say that I really like all of their eras, all of their lineups. There's one I'm not as crazy on, but I get it. I don't dislike it. But they've gone through a ton, and we'll take a little walk through history. So let's start in 1968 with some super psychedelic, crazy stuff, which I know Glenn Kellaway, who obviously can't be here, I know this is his favorite era of the band, but we're going to go with the Mark I era of Deep Purple. Shades of Deep Purple, this is their debut. Psychedelic rock. I think on here they do have, so this obviously had Hush, which, Hush was played all over the place, but that was a Joe South song anyway. I think they do 2 or 3 Beatles covers on here that are wacky. I mean, they're like whirling dervish type psychedelic Beatles tunes. I like this stuff. They also did, I'm So Glad, a ton of other sort of staples of the day. But I think in terms of psychedelic hard rock, I'm a big fan of Shades of Deep Purple, Book of Taliesin, and the self-titled that came after. I think those are all great. Again, Glenn loves that self-titled Deep Purple record. I think it's good stuff. But after that, Rod Evans, Nick Simper end up getting fired. Rod Evans would run to the United States and end up forming Captain Beyond. Nick Simper would end up starting a band called Warhorse. I would love that album, by the way. I think that's like a super rare, like couple $100 album, Warhorse, but I would love it. And they bring in Roger Glover and Ian Gillan, who are part of another band, and they put out this arguably best, most important hard rock album of the early 70s. This is Deep Purple in Rock. This is my favorite Deep Purple record. They come in and sound like a completely different band. No longer that psychedelic stuff. They come in hard and heavy, a completely different band. This is just outstanding stuff. This is now what they would call the Mark II lineup with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover in it. They would crank out a bunch of records and then sort of go out with this. Who Do We Think We Are? This is sort of their last record. And to me, this is a band that sounds really tired and kind of over each other. This did have Woman from Tokyo on it, which was a huge hit, but I think a lot of Deep Purple fans aren't crazy about that song. But they just sound kind of, a little bit bored here. So Roger Glover, Ian Gillan are out. What are they going to do now? Without missing a beat, they bring in Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale for their Mark III lineup and drop in with Burn, in the same year release Stormbringer as well. Again, it's interesting. It's like they bring in these new lineups. And my thing is like, okay, new lineup. At this time, no one really knew David Coverdale. Glenn Hughes was coming from a band called Trapeze, which was a really cool sort of early 70s funky hard rock band. But they bring in these artists. They release this record, terrible album cover. And it starts with the track Burn, which Burn might be one of the top 10 greatest songs in hard rock history. I mean, I'm talking just as a whole. And they kicked the album off with it. one of the best riffs ever, one of the best solos ever, greatest like musical passages ever. They got David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes trading on and off on vocals. I mean, this is an insanely good record. And I understand a lot of people probably wrote them off. And Stormbringer is amazing as well. So then Richie Blackmore gets a little bit petty about some things, not a huge fan, whatever it is. And this is where the James Gang connection comes in. Because who was in the James Gang after Joe Walsh? Well, the great Tommy Bolin, also known as Steve's long-lost boyfriend, lover, husband, whatever you want to call it. The man who was coming really from, obviously he was doing stuff with James Gang. He was in Zephyr. He was doing stuff with Billy Cobham on Spectrum, which was a jazz record. And they released this. There it is. This, I guess this is now Mark IV, technically, because you have no Richie Blackmore. So you have Glenn Hughes, David Coverdale, Ian Pace, John Lord, and now Tommy Bolin coming in. This is an awesome record. This is kind of funky. This is kind of bluesy. It doesn't sound like their earlier stuff. It's not as heavy, but it's awesome. Again, Deep Purple coming through with just some of the worst album artwork. I mean,
they love to show all their faces. And just
they love all right. It's like you go from In Rock, which is
there's your next edit for the live chat is putting our faces on Deep Purple records.
smart, and it's it's the Come Taste the Band, and the band is in a giant wine chalice, and on this side you have the lipstick stain. It's just. Yeah, so Come Taste the Band, outstanding. But then that obviously would be very, very short-lived as well. In which case, the next time that they would come back would be their Mark II reunion lineup, which was Perfect Strangers 1983, 1984, 1984, which was their Mark II return. So, yeah, and again, after this, they would go through more lineup changes. They would bring in, Richie Blackmore would leave, I think, in the late 80s. They would have more reunion stuff. They brought in Steve Morse. Steve Morse is yet gone, and I actually love all those records too. But a band that was so prolific in their lineups that they actually had to call them Mark lineups. And so when you're talking about Deep Purple, you got to know, you're talking about Mark II or Mark II, Mark I, Mark IV. Which Mark? Who's Mark? Because it's Mark, but it's spelled like mock.
Well, that's kind of what the stream has become with all the various players that have come in and out.
Yeah, exactly. It's well played, sir. Well played, sir. And I will say, too, I got a chance to see Glenn Hughes live a couple years ago because he was leading the Dead Daisies. Steve, did you ever see the Dead Daisies when they were playing? I feel like they would have played at the Arcada up there in where you're at. They were awesome. Incredible band, and it's just crazy to me. Glenn Hughes is in his 70s now, mid-70s, I think, and dude just still voice-wise is just ripping it up and sounds amazing. Still a credible performer, great singer. But yeah, a band that's gone through a bazillion lineup changes. I happen to love every single one of them, with the exception of one that I just really like. And everything else I'm totally good with and a big fan of. So there's your Deep Purple history nugget. Hope I did you well, Steve. I hope I did you well.
I will say, Alex, I mean this sincerely, like your just brief breakdown of Deep Purple is like the most that I've ever learned about Deep Purple. I know I've heard Steve give videos, and Steve, yes, I'm listening to your videos, so don't make a joke. But that was just like a really, it was quick, but it was showing, like I didn't realize like how many variations. I mean, obviously I know that those types of groups that are still, trailing around, like the Yeses or the Jethro Tulls that are just, Ian Anderson, go through the lineup changes, but that was very informative. So
I appreciate that, Sam. Thank you, sir. And I will say too, it's not necessarily part of the topic here, but something that's important. So, David Coverdale would later, be the front man, lead guy in Whitesnake. Whitesnake has been associated with ridiculous glam, hair metal, Here I Go Again.
Yeah.
Is this love? The whole thing. But, understand that David Coverdale formed Whitesnake. In fact, it was one of those like Leslie West situations with Mountain. It was David Coverdale's Whitesnake. That was the name of his solo debut, which Whitesnake, especially early Whitesnake, I mean, they were a band that was formed in the mid to late 70s, much larger in Britain, huge in Britain. And the British people love those first 5 or 6 Whitesnake albums. It's blues rock, man. It is hard rock and blues rock. It wasn't until 1987 that it blew up in like the hair metal world simply based on the time. But David Coverdale was doing bluesy hard rock since the mid 70s and all the way up to that part. So I wasn't going to give a shout out to David Coverdale and his voice and Whitesnake, because what you hear on the 1987 record with Here I Go Again and all that other stuff is really not, that's kind of the end of the career. Everything leading up to that point was just good old fashioned bluesy hard rock that sounds completely different than what we know from that sort of hair metal, glam metal type of era.
See, I always associate Whitesnake with like Scorpions, because Scorpions too, right? Like they started like in the late 60s. Did they not? Like in Sweden, where they were from? And like they were the same kind of thing, like a psych group. And like then all you can think about is, like those mid 80s hair metal Scorpions hits. So I always, those two careers always merge in my little brain. But
All right, Sam, what do you got?
Well, Alex is kind of, he's talked about some of his favorite, genres with prog and that sort of thing. So, again, I'm doing that too. And this is probably one of those things that not many people care about, but I have to talk about it because it was such a significant shift in styling for this group. And I mean, I know Alex will know, all these references, but it's a group I talk about all the time. Head and the Heart.
Knew it.
So the reason I start with this record, this is their second album called Let's Be Still. Again, there were 6 members out of Seattle, which where they were based, but the core, the main 2 singers, Jonathan Russell and Josiah Johnson, were leading that charge. And then all of a sudden, really after this record, which has that equal contribution of Josiah and Jonathan, and again, the first album was very folky, very harmony based, very 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 relatable to people in their early 20s kind of record. Longing, they had songs like Winter Song was on there, things like that. And then this album had stuff like Another Story, like Josh McBride, These Days Are Numbered, 10,000 Weight in Gold, just really really strong lyrics. I mean, Josiah Johnson was really pumping out some great tunes like Josh McBride. My Friends is another good one. And this kind of, I mean, it sounds a little bit different than the first album. It's obviously more produced, and which is good. I mean, it's not 80s production, like an acoustic album, like 80s production kind of thing. But it's got a little bit more instrumentation. The songs seem to be a little bit more thought out, even though I don't like it as much as the first album. But with that said, let's move into their third album, which is called Signs of Light. And again, you have on the cover, I mean, the band, it's hard to see with this, with the lighting, but Josiah is on the cover. They're all sitting around a pool, and Josiah is on the cover, but you really only hear his vocals, at least to my ears, on 2 songs on this record. Because at this point, he was really struggling with addiction. That they've never fully talked about what exactly he was addicted to. I just know that it involved drugs and alcohol, but he kind of pulled himself out of the band. And
he was addicted to drugs and alcohol.
say that again. Your microphone broke.
I say it. It sounds like he was addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. I don't know what he.
I mean, you made it seem like he was addicted to Brussels sprouts or something.
That's just me. Yeah, green. But no, he. I mean, the title track, "Signs of Light," Josiah sings. That's the very last track on the record. And there's another song. It might be. It's the song "Colors," I think, is the song that he has a co-lead vocal with Jonathan. But after that, it's really just the other members. And then at this point, the female in the group, Charity, her husband, Maddie Gervais, who he had some contributions on the last album, but he is really full on this record, even though you can't really hear him. But he's picking up the slack instrumentally, where Josiah was really just not coming to the studio sessions. And even by this third album, it's going into a very produced, kind of a poppy vein. very much, like some vocal effects are going into play. But still, it's kind of that bridge album, between what they were and then what they would come with their next 2 albums after this. And I'm only going to show one of those, which Alex showed in a video not too long ago. This is their album Living Mirage, which is the first full album without Josiah as a listed member. Like he has no lyrics on this album. He doesn't play, guitar on one song. He's not on this album at all. And there's Maddie right there, so he's not even on the cover. And again, this album is full on indie pop. It's not acoustic really, and other than a song. And they really with this album and then their next album called Every Shade of Blue, they were very much, in that pop vein. They have a lot of, effects, again, some drum machines, some sound effects, even a little bit of a mix of maybe not hip hop, because they don't, but some vocals that kind of emulate that. And I know Steve, per my recommendation, he picked up their most recent album, Every Shade of Blue, and I think he likes about 60% of it. But anyway, they moved from that acoustic sound, that indie sound that was so big in 2010 or so with Mumford & Sons and the Lumineers, and then they merged into very atmospheric indie kind of pop. So they really took a turn, not a turn for the worse, but they took a turn when Josiah pulled himself out of the group, and he hasn't been back since, other than playing a few one-off shows with the group. So that was kind of my that was my ego boost selection, was The Head and the Heart, but I had to talk about him because the sound it changed completely.
Love it.
Okay. I'm going in the Americana thing with these guys.
I'm glad you did. Yeah.
The band. I love the band. They had their career that everyone knows. It sort of culminated with The Last Waltz. And I don't think that they knew at the time that The Last Waltz would be the end. But it kind of was, because Robertson parted ways with the band. I don't know that there was an official parting of ways. I just think they never, I think they stopped speaking for a while, to be quite honest. And
yeah.
Through a lot of the 80s and 90s, Robertson was a dick, and he wanted to separate himself from the legacy of the band because he felt he was bigger than the legacy of the band. And I think he realized, in the 21st century that he really should embrace the legacy of the band, because it'll make him a shit ton of money. And so Last Waltz was 77, I think, when that record came out. And the band, still using the name, did release 3 more studio albums. And the first one was in 93 called Jericho. And then they released High on the Hog, and they released Jubilation. And it was Richard Manuel had died. He's on one song on this. So it's Levon Helm, Rick Danko, Garth Hudson, and then you've got Jim Weeder, Randy Ciarlante, I think is how you pronounce his name, and Richard Bell. They became the band, but to me, it's not the band. It's just not. This album actually isn't terrible, because it does kind of sound like the band, but it kind of sounds like someone trying to be the band. I mean, there's only one song in here that's written by Levon, and everything else is a cover. Like Atlantic City is a Springsteen cover. There's a Dylan cover on here. They're all songs that I get the impression they're songs that they found that they thought they could make sound like the band. That's always been my impression of this.
Good point.
And the band was kind of lightning in a bottle, right? They're all absolutely incredibly musicians, and what they crafted together as that group of 5 men was greater than the sum of its parts. And when you don't have Robbie Robertson as part of that, who was the guy that wrote 80%
Just about
of their
everything.
songs,
Yeah.
90% of their songs, something's missing. You know, this to me, as much as I love Levon and Garth and the guys, this just kind of feels like them trying to desperately cling on to something that should have been put out to pasture. Unfortunately, you're never going to recapture what was. And even if Robertson had rejoined them, I don't think they still, even with him, would have been able maybe to recapture that, because I think the time for that kind of music had sort of passed, right? You know, the 90s is Nirvana, Pearl Jam, that kind of stuff. People aren't listening to the band, right? So who's to say what if? But what I am saying is that the band, is, as far as I'm concerned, an imposter of the band. So,
Well, to piggyback off that too, it's, you know, kind of goes with the whole, you know, back to the Beach Boys. I mean, you know, Mike Love for years, I know we said we weren't going to talk about Mike Love, but was saying, you know, like he went to court so many times to get the song writing credits with Brian. You know, he said Murray Wilson left him off of a bunch of songs on those 60s records. But then you have to think about, I mean, obviously we know Brian wasn't really a lyricist. I mean, he wrote some of those simple early tunes and a couple later on, but they were never strong lyrically. You know, Brian was Elton John and Mike was Bernie Taupin.
Yep.
Those early, you know, those first 10 records or so. But you think about it, like, you know, Mike's talking about like how he wrote, you know, Good Vibrations in his car, you know, driving to the studio, blah, blah, blah. But then you have to think, you know, if Mike wrote such great tunes, according to him, why haven't the Beach Boys put out a record without Brian Wilson?
right.
You know, so it's, I mean, obviously because like when Brian left to, you know, when he was in bed, Carl took over because Carl was also a genius in his own right. And Dennis could do his thing. And Mike could play off of those guys, but he doesn't have anybody to play off of. He might still write songs. I know he's put out a few like Mike Love records, but there's never been another Beach Boys album without Brian Wilson. I mean, they had that, That's Why God Made the Radio. And then they had like the country album in the 90s, like that was covers of their own songs.
Yep.
So like, you know, with the band, you know, you can do all you want to say that you're the band, but at the end of the day, you don't have your Brian Wilson.
That you hit the nail on the head. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And unfortunately, I hate to feed, I mean, Robertson's not around anymore, but I hate to feed that ego, because he was an asshole for about 20 years. He wanted nothing to do with them. And then in the last 15, 20 years, he's trying to rewrite history that, you know, he did that documentary, you know, We Were Brothers. Well, you treated them like shit for 25 years, you know, and screwed them out of songwriting credits and royalties and whatever. So, you know, I hate to feed Robertson's ego, even though he's not here, saying, you know, they're not the band without you. But I mean, that's the reality. They are a band, but they're not the band. So, have I ever heard Largo, the semi-concept album that Levon and Garth were on? No, I did not even know such a thing existed, so I'll have to look it up. I'm intrigued. Mike Love did make a few big contributions to songs, but it was mainly Brian.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, I mean, he had lyrics that were, I mean, Good Vibrations. I love the lyrics of that song. I love those surf songs, but the musicality was not there.
Yeah.
So.
And here's the other thing too is, you know, Mike Love, let's give the man some credit, wrote some good lyrics, but he wouldn't have written those good lyrics if he didn't have music to put them to, right? And generally the music comes first. So would he have written something like Good Vibrations without any music? I don't know. Who knows?
Right.
All right, we got time for another go around, fellas. You guys all got one more on you?
And share some records, yeah.
I got about 4 more go rounds in me, Rob. All right, we're back in Prog world. Hope you're ready. Well, and you know, I talked about Yes. I talked about Genesis. Not talking about ELP, because ELP was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and then Emerson, Lake and Powell, if you want to count that. But the other one, the big four, that went through a number of lineup iterations in a number of different eras, of course, is the Kings themselves, King Crimson. This is, I will say, one of my prized possessions. That sounds so stupid, but this is a superbly clean, minty fresh first press, but which is very hard to find. But obviously, classic album cover in the Court of the Crimson King, 1969. One of the greatest debuts. You know, sort of one of the, a lot of people say this is like the formal start of what we know as progressive rock, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, I love this album. I think it is not, I don't think it's a perfect album. I'll say that. I do love it. I don't put it up there with my favorites, but obviously I absolutely love it. Well, you know, you have this, you have the record that came after In the Wake of Poseidon, which is great as well. Much of the same in terms of, I think, musicality and the type of music they're going for. Then a couple of other lineup changes. They release Lizard. They release Islands. They sort of go into like almost some jazzier routes. The whole time, the only real consistent is Robert Fripp. I mean, King Crimson has always been a Robert Fripp project through and through. So let's fast forward from 1969. We'll jump up to 1973 with this classic, Lark's Tongues and Aspic, where now we're introducing this lineup that is Robert Fripp, John Wetton, Bill Bruford, and then you obviously kind of wrap it up. You know, they're like the main three, but then you have David Cross and Jamie Muir as well on some other areas. But what this really did, this was cemented the beginning of the Fripp, Wetton, Bruford sort of just insane virtuosic type of period. There are days that this record is my favorite record. I think so many people will put Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 1 in terms of like some of the best songs. I mean, you could argue that the roots of progressive metal started here. A lot of that was because this was one of the first bands that really introduced a lot of dissonant tonalities with what they were doing. It wasn't just all centered around some like major sort of like sounds that felt good. I mean, the stuff that Fripp was doing was so technical and dissonant. In fact, I remember seeing I think he was on Howard Stern recently. This is very bizarre, but I thought it was the coolest thing, was seeing an interview that Howard Stern was doing with Dave Matthews. And Dave Matthews, if you watch him play live, it never looks like he just plays a basic G or a basic C. He's always doing these weird stretches. Everything he's playing is just all over the place. It's like these like 7-fret stretches. And he said he learned to play that way, learning Robert Fripp songs from King Crimson. And I think that's the coolest thing, that Dave Matthews was influenced by Robert Fripp and King Crimson. Very weird. And so this really cemented this. This lineup would release Lark's Tongues and Aspic. You then followed it up with Starless and Bible Black. This is sort of half live, half studio, but incredible stuff. And then arguably what has become maybe their best, depending on who you ask, the classic Red. Again, there you have Fripp, Bruford, Wetton doing their thing. I mean, yeah, they had a couple of other members, but at the same time, you can clearly tell that they're highlighting these three individuals. 1974, outstanding. But it doesn't end there, because then they come back several years later with almost a completely different lineup. Fripp and Bruford keep it together, but now they're going to partner up in a really weird way with a couple of individuals from kind of outside of the classic progressive rock area. They're going to partner. They're going to bring in Adrian Belew on guitar and vocals. Adrian Belew at the time was a studio musician in the late 70s, playing on Lodger, the David Bowie record. He played in Remain in Light with Talking Heads. He's really coming from that art rock, Talking Heads type background. And they're also going to bring in the great Tony Levin, who also was playing with damn near everybody in the world at this point in time. And they released Discipline. This now they're back to a 4-piece: Bruford, Fripp, Levin, Belew. And this is a completely different sounding band, but equally as impressive. They would release this, immediately followed by this record, Beat. I wouldn't be a cool vinyl person if I didn't say something like, look at that promo.
And the hype.
Look at the promo. Well, see, that's how you know sometimes, Sam, back in the day, it would be a promo if they would put the hype stickers directly on the sleeve itself instead of sealing it and putting it on the sleeve. And so a lot of times, a lot of those old promos will be on there. And then this record as well, 3 of a perfect pair. These all came out one after the other. I think it was like 80, 81, 82 or something like that. With that foursome, giggity, but absolutely outstanding. I mean, Tony Levin has, he was coming from playing on, the guy's played on a gazillion records. At this time too, he was coming from Peter Gabriel's solo albums. He's still touring with Peter Gabriel. He would later end up joining Liquid Tension Experiment, which was a huge tie-in for Dream Theater. Always got a tie-in a Dream Theater reference. So partnered up with them later. I'm actually getting a chance. This is the coolest thing to me, seeing Tony Levin, who's like damn near 80. I think he's like 79. He's playing with his band called the Stickmen, who are like a kind of like a trio of progressive rock, sort of avant rhythmic type stuff, because he plays the Chapman stick. Don't know if you've ever seen anybody play the Chapman stick, but it's a very rhythmic type of way of playing bass. And he's playing at like a dive bar that fits about 150 people 2 miles down my street in 2 weeks. So I'm going to be like face to face there with old Tony, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, I mean, these are viewed purely as a trio because I mean, they're so good, they're so strong, but completely different. I mean, this really is like, it's like mixing the quirkiness of Talking Heads, but with like the rhythmic and virtuosic performance of, I don't even know what you compare it to, but these are wacky records, but absolutely outstanding. They would release Thrack, Power to Believe, I think another album or two later on in their career, but those are sort of the deep dive into some of the lineup changes. Of course, Robert Fripp being the lone standard all the way through. So,
Sam.
That was kind of a nice tribute too to our buddy Glenn, because he's a big Fripp fan.
We keep talking about him like he's not around. For those that missed the beginning, Glenn's not dead. He's just taking an indefinite break. So.
As Frank Zappa used to say about jazz, Glenn's not dead. He just smells funny.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
I can attest to that. I was with Glenn in person yesterday.
As can I. Yeah, it still lingers on my couch. Yeah.
That's what happens when he takes his clothes off.
Right. Yeah. The Cosmic Torpedoes,
He cosmic torpedoed your couch.
So with that, let's move into probably a band that you don't expect me to ever really talk about, but I do like this band, and I feel like
Guns N' Roses.
You can't have a lineup talk, I don't think, and y'all might have pulled a couple of these records. So if you did, please feel free to jump into the fire with me. You got to talk about Pink Floyd.
Of course.
Yes, sir.
They're obviously started as a quartet, with Syd Barrett leading the charge. You had, Richard Wright, Nick Mason, and Roger Waters with him. But Roger Waters had not developed into the, Pink Floyd genius that he would become just a few years later, because Syd was the man. Like, he was Mr. Art School. They're putting out this record, which, compare this record to something like, The Wall, however many years later, completely different sound. And obviously Syd was only on the first 2 records. You were on this, and then you had Obscured by Clouds, which came next. And even on Obscured by Clouds, Syd was already pulling himself back. And Gilmour, I think Gilmour is on one song. I think there's only one song that has all 5 of the Pink Floyd, originators on it, as it were, if you count David Gilmour. Because a lot of people, I would say even like casual Pink Floyd fans don't know that, Gilmour wasn't a founding member of Pink Floyd. But like if you were to take the hit off of this record, you have, Interstellar Overdrive. You also have Astronomy Domini. And then you have the next record, which has, Set the Controls to the Heart of the Sun. I'm a fan of this. Again, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I'm a fan of this. Not as big of a fan of Obscured by Clouds, but I do, appreciate it. But I'm a Gilmour guy. you know, you have your Gilmore Girls. I'm your Gilmore guy. So take that as
Here
you
all
will.
night, folks.
Yeah, cheers, you know. But I mean, again, you had Gilmore come into the fold, but again, not taking on the, you know, vocal prowess that he would later on. Because again, Waters kind of was like, okay, I've really got to step in because Sid has pulled himself out. Sid was just kind of losing it, even though Roger and Dave helped Sid with those solo records that he put out. And what's funny is a lot of people thought Sid Barrett died, like that he was just like a victim of like the road. But Sid Barrett died in like 2001 or 2 or something like that.
It was mid 2000s, a little bit like 2008 or so.
Because he shows up. I mean, the big story is he showed up during the "Wish You Were Here" sessions. You know, he had lost. I mean, he'd shaved his hair off. He, you know, was just like 120, 130 pounds heavier. They didn't recognize him, and that was the last time a lot of those guys saw him before he, you know, would die. You know, 30 years later. But to take a record like this, like Piper, and then you know, flash forward to this. Could this have been done with Sid Barrett? I don't know. I'm not a Pink Floyd expert. This is obviously one of those, you know, babies that Roger Waters, you know, took from the cradle, and you know, you can listen to albums before this, like, you know, like Metal, and even things like I don't know, like I don't know, like Adam Hart. Like there were traces of and Social Full of Secrets. There are traces of Dark Side on those records. But then this is the album that just completely put them over. Again, at this point, no longer a trippy psych band. They're full on, again, stadium band. They had the light shows. They had the props on stage. You know, Gilmore is just ripping it on guitar. They were doing better with, you know, trading off ideas between Gilmore and Waters, even though Waters says, you know, this is all him. But again, you can't talk about, I mean, one of the biggest lineup changes in history. You have the people that are just diehard Barrett fans with those first 2 records. You have the people that are diehard Gilmore fans. I mean, he's considered one of the guitar gods, you know, out there. So I don't know. It's just one of those like questions, you know, like what would Pink Floyd have been had Sid stuck around for, you know, even just 2 or 3 more records? Like, where would they have gone? Would they have gone down like the ultra, you know, indulgent Adam Hart Mother, or you know, Ummagumma, or you know, records like that? So that's my very novice, you know, take on Pink Floyd. Again, thought I would go outside of the box. I do like Pink Floyd, but I never talk about them because there are much smarter people out there that know a lot more about Pink Floyd than I do. So,
Great pick.
Well, you did better than I would do, Sam. So,
well, I'll take
done,
that,
sir.
whatever that means.
I like Pink Floyd, but I don't know enough to say anything intelligent. So, all right, I'm going to go with a band that had a lineup change, and after that lineup change, the subsequent work was not very good, but it had nothing to do with the lineup change. So, the band I'm going to talk about is Creedence. So this is their second to last album, Pendulum, which came out in, I don't know. It had Molina, Have You Ever Seen the Rain, Hey Tonight. Pretty good record. I mean, it sounds like, you know, all those great classic Creedence Clearwater Revival records. Well, after the recording of that, Tom Fogerty, John's brother, the rhythm guitar player, he left because, you know, him and Tom were not getting along. I mean, kind of like the 70s Gallagher brothers, really. I think, and this is, you know, I've not read this in direct quotes or whatever, but I think he sort of gets sick of John's, this is the way we're doing it, and I write the songs. Because originally Creedence, well, actually before it was Creedence, it was the Gollywogs, but it was Tom's band, and John joined, and John slowly took control of the band. But had John not taken control of the band, we would have never heard of them, because until John started writing the songs, they were nobodies for the most part. So Tom Fogerty leaves, and Creedence becomes a 3-piece, and they release their last album, Mardi Gras, and it's just John and Doug Clifford and Stu Cook. And I think John sort of acquiesced and said, all right, guys, you want to write some songs? Because you say, I have total control and you're sick of it. So you guys have at it. And everyone contributed equally to the songwriting in this album. So roughly, I mean, I didn't count it per se, but each of the guys wrote their own songs. A couple hits on here: "Someday Never Comes" and "Sweet Hitchhiker," classic John Fogerty songs. The rest of this, I mean, they cover "Hello Mary Lou," which is an old Ricky Nelson song. But everything else on here, so I mean,
Save that for after dark. Yeah.
It's lackluster, and it's kind of, it's almost like I would imagine that John Fogerty would have taken some proud consolation going, told you guys. And I think, and then there's all the bad blood between Creedence that still exists to this day. But a lineup change that didn't affect the band. It just happened to be coincidental that the band took a shit after this, not because of the guy that left, but because the guy that was a creative genius behind this band said, you guys think you can do better? Have at it. Clearly you can't. So
interesting take.
What came
CCR
after
was
that?
salvageable if John had written the songs. Absolutely, James. I agree with you 100%.
Rob, what was the record that came after Pendulum? You said that was the second to last or whatever?
Yeah, so Pendulum was the second to last, and then this one here, the last one where they were trios, Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras, that's right. Yep.
So the couple John songs that are on Mardi Gras are great. Who doesn't love Sweet Hitchhiker? What a hell of a great song. But everything else, no. So.
But I mean, they put out, it's like, they talk about bang for your buck between, putting out they put out 3 records in '69, right? Like, not to bury the lead for the After Dark, but I mean, they kind of blew their load in terms of the amount of stuff they put out in the short amount of, right? It's weird to think like Pendulum is viewed as like an end of career record, and it's like 1970.
Right?
Yeah.
What? What?
Well, James makes a point here. Fogerty never had another hit album until Center Field. You're right, he didn't. I mean, Center Field was what, late 80s? So I mean, I've got it. I'd have to walk over to the stack.
Was it late?
Sometime in the 80s. I mean, John went and did that Blue Ridge Rangers thing without
85.
having his, and it wasn't very good.
I like it. I like it.
Well, that's in your
Yeah,
wheelhouse,
that's
right?
because you live there, Sam.
Solidly Americana.
I know. I remember because I bought that when Alex was down here, and I remember you commenting on the video because you're looking for a copy, aren't you? Like a clean copy of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have. He had a record store day double-sided 12-inch single of the Blue Ridge Rangers, which I have, but I'm still looking for the album just because I love Fogerty and I've got just about everything. It's just that's a missing piece. I've just never.
Do you have the Did you have like the companion, like the Blue Ridge Ranger Rods Again, that came out like in 2011? Yeah.
Yeah, I got
That's
that.
good too.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, yes, he didn't have anything after that, but maybe he burnt himself out because look at the number of hits that Fogerty wrote in that very, very short period of time. Maybe he just burned himself out. I don't know.
It's kind of like the Billy Joel syndrome. I mean, Billy Joel wasn't that compressed, obviously. I mean, he had like a 20-year, hit making career, but he, in his mind, he's like, yeah, I burnt myself out about early 90s. I was done with River of Dreams. And even, I mean, Elton John, for all the good stuff that still came out even up till today, those hits really stopped about 80, 81, or like the Tom Bell sessions, because he pumped out so much in those mid 70s years and works like day and night with Bernie.
Yeah.
You're gonna fall.
And another example too is you look at Paul McCartney post Beatles. He puts out something awesome like Band on the Run, and he also put out some stuff that was really shitty for a fairly long period of time. So, I think I don't know that you have indefinite momentum, right? I think at some point everyone's gotta burn out. James, I certainly hope that doesn't happen.
Now, hold on. Let me jump on this really quick. Rob, you know what I'm afraid of? I'm really afraid that some people have been whispering about it, but what's the release date on Taylor's new record?
April 19th.
When's Record Store Day?
Oh, no.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Oh, shit.
I am deeply afraid of a Taylor Swift, Dead Poet Society, whatever. I know it's Tortured Poets Department.
I've made that
I'm
joke
definitely
too.
afraid of a Record Store Day issue of that record that is going to blow everything up.
Oh man, I mean, like you could pre-order the deluxe version, and I've pre-ordered her other stuff, but I don't know that I'm going to pre-order this one because you pay shipping and it's easier just to get it.
You could wait 3 weeks, get it for half as much with free shipping on Amazon. So,
right,
yeah, it'll be around.
But her Record Store Day stuff gets crazy expensive. So, gosh, I hadn't thought about that, but man, it's a good idea.
The Long Pond Studio Sessions, that's a $300 record right now.
I have it. Thank you to Music Talk with John. He helped me out.
Oh, was John?
He found one at his local, and he knew I was looking for it, and he texted me that morning. Do you have it? And I said, no, my local didn't have it. He goes, I get you one. And he sent it up to me.
I bought 3 that day. One for me. Well, I mean, 3 at 3 different stores because you can't buy duplicates.
Right.
So I went to 3 different stores, one for me and then one for 2 friends of mine.
Yeah.
And I'm like sitting there and I was like, I should have kept those 3.
Yeah.
Paid a bill or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite of all of them, to be quite honest.
Oh.
Of all the albums, it's my favorite. Anyway.
Speaking of, I mean, they haven't released any RSD stuff yet, have they?
No list. It's
Just
on 420.
Yeah.
No list though.
We got 4 minutes left. Do we want to just talk about what we're working on? Anything we put out recently? Anything that we have coming up? I
want to just give a quick shout out, Rob, really quick. It's sort of semi part of the list because this was, bands recovering from tragedy, main members dying, all those different things. Shout out to, I grabbed this record, Brothers and Sisters from the Allman Brothers. Sam, this was the record that we sort of recommended to you because it's I don't want to say it's like radio friendly, but it's not as jammy maybe.
Yeah.
You obviously have Ramblin' Man, Southbound, Jessica on it. But this was after, Dwayne died, in which you lose one of the Allman Brothers, the lead guitar, the best one. It's like, oh gosh. But this to me, I mean, this is a Dickie Betts step up record. Like if the topic was like band members who stepped up and filled some shoes, this is a Dickie Betts record. And he just kills on here. And one shout out too, I love the Allman Brothers, but they kind of jumped the shark a little bit after this. Win, Lose, or Draw, or whatever it's called. Don't like that record. And then they were kind of not much until the early 90s when they sort of reformed. But one thing I'll say, it's just the history of the Allman Brothers is so wild to me that, you lose Dwayne Allman, I think, in some kind of motorcycle accident, something like that in like 71, I think. And then the very, very next year on the same highway strip, you lose Barry Oakley, the bassist, in the same exact damn way. You couldn't make that up.
No.
But it's like, and it's not like, it's not outside of like LA or Brooklyn. It's outside of Macon, Georgia. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things of like, this is weird. But shout out to Brothers and Sisters from the Allman Brothers. In terms of them coming back and just making a killer record after that tragedy, it's where it's at.
What do you got? What are you working on, Alex? What do you got coming out? What did you do recently? What do you got to tell folks?
Wow. The next thing that I'll probably post, I mean, of course, naturally, we're going live the After Dark after this, immediately following the show. But the big thing is second episode of 5 Favorites we'll be posting here in the next couple of days. It's all edited. I just need to upload it. I might just do it tonight when I'm sleeping. But it features one Sam St. John as my second guest in the 5 Favorites. So
Sam, when I was going back and like editing it and stuff like that, I was kind of giggling at some of the dumb stuff that we said, but I guess that's how it goes. But truthfully, little bit of a moment. Can't thank you enough for spending, an hour with me or whatever it was. We had a good time, and going back and watching that video, I think when I say a lot of people are going to enjoy it, I'm really talking about the tens and tens of people who are going to watch it, but that's okay. Cause that's fine with me. So if 10 people watch that hour-long video, that is 10 public watch hours. So, it all counts. It all counts.
To your pocket. Yeah.
That's right. So yeah.
That's what it's all about.
And then for any Prague fans out there, I've kind of become, I don't know if I'm an official member, but a semi-regular on the Prague Corners live stream on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Couple weeks or 3 weeks ago, we ranked our favorite Jethro Tull songs. 2 weeks ago, we ranked our favorite Kansas songs. A week ago, our favorite Dream Theater songs, which you knew I love. And then this coming Sunday, we're ranking our favorite Genesis songs. So you'll probably see me next on the Prague Corner this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Didn't you just do a video the other day with Racer Joe about your first concert?
I did do that. Thanks, Rob. Weren't you there?
I was actually, yes.
You were there.
I was.
You were there.
Yeah.
And you were there. Yeah.
Right.
So we're also, as Glenn likes to call me, bit of a whore. There is not a live stream I turn down. So if you are lonely and need to call somebody, you know where to call.
Who are you going to call? Not the Ghostbusters.
Yeah. But something else. All right.
So yeah, we did it. We did Racer Joe or Racer Records, who will probably be on the after show, I would imagine, in a few minutes.
I would hope so.
I hope so. He has a weekly Tuesday live stream that he just started yesterday, and Alex and I were the inaugural first guests. And it's called "Hey, I Saw Those Guys." And every week it's about people attending concerts. So because it was the first video, we talked about the first concert we ever saw, which for Alex was
Def Leppard and Bryan Adams.
And for me, it was the Guess Who. So, Sam, what do you got going on? What's coming up?
Well, obviously with Alex's episode, I'll post that on my community page whenever that's up and about, just to get those views to my boy. I just posted a new original song yesterday that just kind of hit me. I wasn't planning on writing a song yesterday, but I was kind of playing around on the new guitar and wrote a song called "A Date One Summer Night." So that's up on my page. I also just posted just before the stream a cover of February 7, which is an Avett Brothers song. And today is what? February the 7th, which is also what? The 60th anniversary of the Beatles arriving in America. We didn't mention that.
Yeah.
The little group.
I want to do a video about it.
Yeah, you should do a video. Since the last video, I posted some videos in the last week. I did Chris Prophy's singer-songwriter thread. I did my January vinyl finds and CD finds. So those are all, within the last 7 days, all up on my channel. Very soon, Rob and I have something coming up.
Yep. For the podcast.
We have another podcast episode, our second one together. So that'll be fun once we nail that down. And I'm sure we will both mention it on our respective channels and share it.
We'll maybe see if we can coordinate next week or something.
Yeah. Just crazy timing between the two of us. But yeah, so podcast episode coming up again. Alex's episodes will be dropping soon. All sorts of new videos up in the last week. I've got 4 or 5 new ones on there. So check them out, as the Canadians would say.
It's not what we say.
Rob, what about for you? What's coming up, brother?
Well, so what do I have going on? I have to shoot a video because I finally met our fearless former leader, Glenn Calloway, yesterday in person. Glenn and I have been friends for like 2 years. Never met him in person, even though we live 2.5 hours away from each other. I was kind of in his neck of the woods yesterday on business, so we got together, we went record shopping, and it was just such a thrill to hang out with Glenn in person finally. So Glenn did a video, actually 2 videos. I will do one about the stuff that I picked up. It'll be up in a day or two. I'm so bloody busy right now with work. I haven't had time to film it. So that's coming up. I have started work on filming a room tour because I haven't done one in 2 years. So I will do a tour of Northern Revolution's world headquarters. That will probably take me a week or so to put that together. Aside from that, I don't know. That's what I got going on right now. And I'm the new host of the Wednesday night from the basement podcast. So there you
Heck
go.
yeah.
Or, live chat. So that's it.
That's it. This was a good
All right.
topic. Thank you, Glenn, for
Great
inspiring
topic.
it.
Great stuff.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We thank you that you spent some time with us tonight. Alex will be hosting the after show over on his channel, Beer and Vinyl, very shortly. I will be joining you in a little bit, Alex. I want to go say goodnight to my kid, and I will join you in a little bit.
Doesn't sound too important to me.
Well, what do you know? Anyway, Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thanks,
See you next
Rob.
week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. I'm not a crook.